I tell you, it's a thrill for me to be here, you know, especially this time of the year in San Antonio. Now, some of you may be wondering why they bring someone with a Pakistani accent to talk to you. Do you need that? Let me tell you why. First place, you can't see anything outside, so you must stay here. Second place is,
y'all don't like my Texas accent, that's why. Now, it's interesting. It's interesting. As soon as I started to talk, it didn't matter that I spoke in the White House 6 times. I used to direct 1,400 PhDs. As soon as I started to say,
I want to tell you all, it's such a thrill for me to be here.
Some of y'all going, oh my God. I'm getting out right now. I'm out of here. Forget about it. In fact, a couple of people right over here, I can see they're church-going people, because as soon as I start to talk, they're going. And they start to nudge each other. I'm telling you, it's real rough, ain't it? Now, why did I start with that accent? The reason I started with that accent is that we're told so many times that it's very important for us to make a good first impression. I've never heard that expression. You've got to make a good first impression. Well, you know what? If you're in a leadership position or if you have a job, you don't have to worry about making that first impression. It's gone. The most important impression we have to make is to take a good first impression. We're not doing a good enough job of taking in a good first impression. We're rejecting good ideas because they sound stupid. We reject good people because they look old or female or because they talk with a foreign accent. We need to start to take a good first impression and start to respect people the minute they open their mouth, no matter what their accent is, no matter how they look. That's the first step to start empowering yourself. And that's not my real accent either. As a matter of fact, this voice right now is the third accent that I'm using. If you want to know my real accent, you have to go to New Rochelle, New York, where I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. You have to talk to my 2 brothers and my brother-in-law who still live there. And they'll tell you, forget about it, he don't know nothing. I mean, who the hell died and made him boss? You know what I'm saying? Forget about it. That's the way I got to talk. Every Italian restaurant in my neighborhood serves broken leg of lamb. Now, I once opened up an FBI police course. I was introduced much as I was today, and I stood behind the podium, and I said, I want to thank you all for inviting me here to talk about police work. It's indeed an important topic. And as I was commencing to talk like this, they was commencing to laugh just like you. And then all of a sudden they said, oh my God, he's going to do this all day. Now, they had 4 weeks on how to kill. I was their last 4 hours on how to communicate. Does that seem backwards? Should we like communicate first? If that doesn't work, then kill? I mean, it just didn't make any sense. And so I continued to talk. And as I was continuing to talk, one guy over here just couldn't stop laughing. And every time I talk like this, he's going. And the guy near him has to look at me. The first guy finally turned his back, and I could see this. But the guy facing him, what's your name? You, sir. Lewis, thank you, Lewis. Easy question, don't worry about it. Write it on your cuff. My name is Lewis. At any rate, the guy where Lewis is sitting, he has no place to turn, and every time the first guy goes, Lewis goes, hee, hee. And it's, hee, hee. Now watch how smart you are. I asked Lewis, I said, excuse me, sir, are you laughing at me? And yelled out his answer. No. How did you know it was no? Because you're a bunch of liars. Takes one to know one, right? How did you know the answer was no? He was laughing in front of 60 people. They all heard him. I ain't lying. I thought you were lying. He said, I told you I wasn't lying. I said, I think you were. Now everybody in the room's getting nervous. These guys carry guns, mace, and sticks. You know what I'm saying? So I turned to the chief of police that introduced me. I said, now, chief, you told me they'd be polite. But they're not being hospitable. Now I didn't come here to be made a fool out of. What's going on? Chief goes, I don't know, Doc. And I turned back to this old guy over here. I said, excuse me, sir, I want to ask you one more time. Were you laughing at me? Now the crowd had already moved their chairs. Can't make this stuff up. He's looking up at me, his knuckles are white. He said, I told you I wasn't laughing. I said, I think you were. Whoa. Now when I say, I think you were, just go, whoa, under your breath, okay? I think you were. That's the way it was. The whole class went, whoa. The whole class went, whoa. And at the back of my neck starts to get wet, and I'm going, oh, God. And I looked out, and I said, you were laughing, and you were laughing. And I started to walk towards the crowd. And as I did, they were trying to scatter while they were still seated. And I said, you were laughing, and you were laughing. And then I said, were you all laughing because of my voice? Well, everybody thought that was funny except old Lewis. And I put my hand over his head, and I said, class, was he laughing? He goes, the rest of the class goes, he laughing, Doc. Was he telling the truth? He lying, Doc. Was he mad? Gonna beat your butt, Doc. Isn't that interesting? I observe reality. I report reality. You lying, you're gonna beat my butt. You're gonna make great cops. But more importantly, you're also gonna make great managers. How many of you have ever experienced a manager where you come up with a great idea, you come up with a new approach, you come up with a different way of doing it, and what do you get from your manager? We've already tried that before. It's none of your business. It's not in our department. If you haven't got enough work to do, I'll give you some work to do. And don't go around me and talk to my boss unless you talk to me first. Don't be talking to the other department unless you talk to me. How many of you have ever heard that in your life? Yeah. You're going to be a great boss. Because one of the things we're taught from we're this high is to lie to each other. And how are we going to have organizations where there's lying going on? Now, you know there's lying going on all the time. Who taught you to lie? Yell it out. Mom. Yeah, my mother taught us to lie. An honest lady. Mom's going to be so mad that you said that. It's on television going out across the country. Her mom taught her to lie. My mother was a maid. My mother was a coal miner's daughter, and there's 3 things she didn't like you to do. Number 1 was lying, and number 2 was cursing, and number 3 was sassing. If you lied, cursed, or sassed, you got your mouth washed out with brown Octagon soap. How many remember that stuff? Oh, how many ever had their mouth washed out? Yeah, but this is the Cam crowd. It's like Dove. You're having a meal. You're not really getting... You try it with brown Octagon soap sometime. And I don't even know what sassing is, but to this day, I don't do it. I do not sass. Now, one day this lady came in our house. Our house was 18 feet wide on the outside. And as she walked into the house, the lady couldn't make it quite down the hall, so she went sideways. Very large woman. We call them pleasingly plump, squared. We want to be politically correct about it. And as she turned around, she said to my mother, how do I look? And my mother said, you look wonderful. You look lovely. And my little 3-year-old brother's watching this. I was 4. And as the lady goes around, it's like watching a merry-go-round. And he wants a part of the action. So he says, you're fat. Oh, wrong thing to say. My mother grabs him. And she drags him into the back room. There was no soap there. It was a bedroom. And she says, I can hear her go, you're not supposed to do that. I'm sorry, Mommy, I'm sorry. Don't you ever do it anymore. I won't do it anymore. I'm sorry, Mommy. You promise me? Yes, Mommy, I won't do that anymore. And I can hear him, boy. I'm glad I kept my mouth shut. And she comes out and she said, I'm sorry. My son is, he's only 3. You really do look lovely. That's a lovely dress. You really look fine. And then from the back room you hear, but she is fat. He's 3. He hasn't learned to lie. How are we going to have organizations where when a woman walks into the room, the jokes change? How are we going to have organizations that when older men walk into the room, the jokes change? And don't tell me they don't change because I have daughters. Certain things women talk about, they don't want men to know. There are things Hispanics talk about, they don't want the rest of those people to know. We have to have organizations built on trust. We have to have organizations built on the ability for each of us to take a little bit more than we now take. Not to be so sensitive, and to be a little more aware at the same time. And that's why this slide is funny, because there are so many times our bosses are the ones that cause us trouble. Happiness is when you wake up and see your boss's picture on the milk carton. Now, the reason why